Good evening. And welcome on behalf of the Austin Area Translators and Interpreters Association. That's the AATIA. That's us. And I'm Tony Beckwith. And excuse me. Thank you for joining us. I was going to say for this year's allergy season, but what I really mean for this year's International Translation Day celebrations. Many thanks also to Malvern Books. Once again, exactly. Once again, they've made this lovely space available to us, and they also have 20% off all books in translation tonight. So please take advantage of that. There'll be a little time later on to browse the stacks and take home some wonderful bargains. Thank you also to our volunteers who selflessly contributed to this evening and brought the delicious snacks we've all been enjoying. I'm going to rattle off a bunch of names here. Kristen Siracusa-Fisher, Cynthia Manning, Joan Tuttle Vargas, Jimena Rico, Monica Spindell, Marian Schwartz, Liliana Valenzuela, Eduardo Mauricio, and Jennifer Yip. Thank you all very much. Today is International Translation Day, an event celebrated all over the world by translators and their associations. It's an important day to us, and we're so glad that you decided to share it with us. It is actually the feast of Saint Jerome, who was a patron saint of translators, librarians, and encyclopedists. It's not easy to say. Jerome was, among other things, a theologian and a historian. He was born in what is now Italy in 347 AD and died on this day, September 30th, in 420, at the ripe old age of 73. He is best known for translating the Hebrew Bible into Latin, which became known as the Vulgate. He was a true pioneer, and may have been the first to acknowledge the precarious nature of translation when he sent his first draft to his agent with a cover note that said, "The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, they ain't necessarily so." Maybe that was our Gershwin. Anyway, we, the AATIA, still honor St. Jerome 1,600 years later, and as fellow translators, we salute him across the centuries for his contribution to our profession. It's wonderful to have somebody like St. Jerome that we can refer back to and enjoy that sense of tradition and permanence that we enjoy as translators. When you think of it, what we're doing is perhaps not the oldest profession, but certainly one of them. No offense, I'm a translator myself. So it's good to have St. Jerome to refer back to as a pillar of our past. We have a very full program this evening, starting with readings by two very distinguished translators and culminating in the presentation of the AATIA's Lifetime Service Award. So please turn off your phones and settle in for some real treats. First up is Marian Schwartz, who translates Russian classic and contemporary fiction, history, biography, criticism, and fine art. She is the principal English translator of the works of Nina Berberova and translated the New York Times' bestseller, The Last Tsar by Edward Brzezinski, as well as classics by Mikhail Bulgakov, Ivan Goncharov, Yuri Olesha, Mikhail Lermontov, and Leo Tolstoy. Her most recent publications are Andrei Gerasimov's Into the Thickening Fog, Polina Deshkova's Madness Treads Lightly, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn's March 1917, The Red Wheel, Node 3, Book 1. She has also won many prizes and awards. If I were to read the full list of Marian's accomplishments and accolades, we'd have to serve breakfast at some point. But I know you're all anxious to hear her read from her latest book, Horsemen of the Sands, which will be published on October 30th. So I'll just say a little bit about that. Leonid Yuzefovich is a celebrated contemporary Russian author and the recipient of Russia's most important prizes. He's known especially for his historical crime fiction series about Inspector Putilin, set in late 19th century Russia, which was made into a very popular TV miniseries. Marian won the Reed Russia Prize in 2014 for her translation of the first volume in the Putilin trilogy, Harlequin's Costume. In Yuzefovich's Horsemen of the Sands, a young Russian tank commander makes friends with a Buryat herdsman who initiates him into the legend of the brutal anti-Bolshevik warlord who conquered Mongolia during the Russian Civil War, and tells a tale of faith and revenge centering on a mysterious amulet said to make the wearer invisible. Sounds like brilliant stuff. I'd just like to say one more thing that is not on Marian's long, impressive resume. Marian has been the driving force behind AATIA's literary special interest group for many years and has been a mentor to many of our members. She has offered advice, encouragement, and guidance to countless newbies and veterans alike. If you're interested in a career in literary translation, there's nowhere better to talk about it than around Marian's kitchen table, where you'll also get one of the best cups of espresso in town. I know, I've had them. Marian is not only a celebrated translator, she is also the best friend a literary translator could have. Please welcome Marian Schwartz.
Actually, the amulet doesn't make you invisible, it makes you invincible. I guess it would work if it made you invisible too. Yeah. That's interesting that I made that mistake. Anyway, the book is put out by Archipelago Books. It's the most beautiful book I've ever had published, and so for that alone, I just can die and go to heaven. I could just stop because I finally have an Archipelago book. Yuzefovich, as Tony explained, is a very famous writer in Russia right now, and has been for a while. He first went to Mongolia, or not to Mongolia, but to Buryatia, which is the region of Siberia next to Mongolia, for his military service. And he became completely entranced by the culture and the history and the religion, and so most of his books do have some reference to Mongolia in them. Sometimes they're very sneaky. In this case, it's actually set in the region, the border region between Buryatia and Mongolia. Also in this volume is another novella by his called The Storm, which I won't talk about, but it's a very fine novella set in Soviet times, with actually nothing about Mongolia in it. Just contradicting myself. The main character is this warlord. His name is Ungen Sternberg, and I just need to tell you a couple of things so you can understand what I'm going to read. He, because of his fascination with Mongolia, he uses a lot of foreign words, and he uses foreign words for the clothing, for religious figures, for buildings, for all kinds of things. There are actually many more of them in the Russian than in the English. And that's a whole other lecture, a separate lecture I give on how that works for the translator. But what's important to understand about this is that he does, one of the effects of this is that he establishes his gaze as an outsider. So he's an outsider in love with his culture. So that's the author. There's also the narrator, who is also looking on this culture. And then there's Ungen Sternberg, the mad baron, who's a sadist, and he is also looking on it. So keep maintaining these foreign words is a way of establishing the gaze of the other. So the words that you need to know, there's two people most of them are self-explanatory. The Bogt Gegen is the living Buddha. He has several names though. He's also Javzan Damba Hutakt, or the Hutakt. And then he's central in this section. And Sagan Ubugun, I read these, so I don't say them out loud that often. He's a god whose role will become clear. And then Naidan Dorji is his interpreter and companion. A King Wang is a high Manchu official, and a Changchun is a general. You're going to remember all these. Then an Ichig is a boot, Mongolian boot, a deal is a Mongolian coat, and the Gao is the amulet, and that is the central artifact of the story. And the Asiatic division is the name of Ungern Sternberg's division that he takes through Mongolia. So I'm going to read a tiny bit of this in Russian, because I'm going to.
Желтый цвет – это солнце, зеленая – земля, жизнь. 3 очка в радужных переливах знаменуют третью степень земного могущества – власть, имеющую личный глаз, чтобы читать в душах. Из нежно-зеленой завязи родился сияющий золотой плод. Перед святыми воротами на Гонсуме, зеленого дворца Богда Гегена, генерал-лейтенант Роман Федорович Унгенштенберг, хан и цинван, откинув занавес паланкина, куда он пересел из автомобиля за 500 шагов от дворца, мягким желтым ичигом ступил на расстеленную в пыли кошму с орнаментом эртнехе, отвращающим всякое зло.
Yellow is the sun, green is the earth, life. The 3 iridescent eyes stand for the 3rd degree of earthly might, power, which has an extra eye to read men's souls. From a tender green seed bud, a shining golden fruit was born. In front of the sacred gates of Bogt Gegen's Nogan Temple, the Green Palace, Lieutenant General Roman Fyodorovich Ungern-Sternberg, Khan and King Wang, flung back the curtain of his palanquin, which he had switched to from his motor car 50 paces from the palace. His soft yellow ichik boots stepped onto the felt mat spread over the dust, which was decorated with erknehe, ornaments that warded off any and all evil. The Nogan Temple was located on a bank of the Tola and separated from the town by broad and flat floodlands covered with dismal gray shingle. Colonel Kozlovsky, the Convice Cossacks, and his orderly, First Lieutenant Yuzhorodny, stayed outside the gates. And from that point, the Baron was escorted only by the scholar Lama Naidan Dorji Gerun, an astrologer who had once been with the Buddhist temple in St. Petersburg. Ungern considered himself a Buddhist, prayed in the capital's halls, and donated large sums to the monasteries, which irritated his Russian confederates, who preferred actually that he not make these feelings public. But few knew that he dreamed of converting the Siberian peasants to the yellow faith, and then to roll the wheel of teaching onward, westward. Christianity had been unable to preserve the monarchies of Europe or stand up to revolution. The ruinous culture of the white race had penetrated into Japan and even China, where the Republican Komings, or revolutionaries, had overthrown the Manchurian dynasty. The sole people left untouched by this contagion were the Mongols. Ungern entered the gates. The Bogt Gegen's palace guard clumsily presented arms, and a respectful whisper rolled through the courtyard. The Changchun, the Changchun, the general. The palace's formal porch had 8 steps, a prototype of Buddhism's eightfold path to salvation. The lamas crowded by the front door parted and formed staggered lines against the walls. All the doors had been flung open, and Ungern saw the familiar enfilade of rooms haphazardly hung with pictures in gilt frames and furnished with sculptures of Buddhas and Chinese vases. Table, floor, and wall clocks ticked away everywhere, and there were stuffed exotic animals and birds in glass boxes. The former reminded men of the brevity of earthly life, the latter of all the diverse guises it takes inside the cycle of samsara. The 2 escorts noisily slipped ahead. When Ungern walked past the depiction of some Buddha or Bodhisattva, Naidan Dorji would explain who it was, and under what circumstances one should go to him for assistance. His duties included initiating the Baron into the teaching about the Four Noble Truths, but above all, Ungern valued him for his ability to predict the future, from the stars, from fish scales, from the cracks in a sheep's scapula tossed on the fire. At the beginning of each lunar month, Naidan Dorji would determine his lucky and dangerous days, indicate the dates incompatible with the use of artillery, machine guns, or cold steel, and in special instances perform the duties of interpreter. Ungern understood Mongolian, but spoke it poorly. They entered the Botegegen's modestly furnished study: screens, a rug, a bronze brazier with a pipe, an altar by the side wall, a low lacquered table with nephrite writing implements, and a stamp with a state seal. The Hutakt was awaiting his guest seated in an armchair and squeezing a thick yellowish red camel's hair rope that went from his fingers through a half-open window. Ungern knew that the rope stretched across the courtyard, through a brick enclosure, and down the other side, with its other end knotted and hanging down. There, two lamas traded in the right to touch this knot. Transmitted through the rope, like electricity through a wire, was the life-giving might of the Javzandamba Hutakt, that is, the Botegegen, the living Buddha. Pilgrims would reverently take the knot in both hands and kiss it, or apply it to those places on the body where the evil spirits causing their illness had settled. Payment was exacted in tea, squirrel or tarbagun pelts, and more rarely in silver syces, Romanov rubles, or Mexican dollars, the last of which, after the revolution, became official currency in Republican China, and were used in Mongolia when it was liberated from the revolutionaries. Here, as of old, the currency was called the yanchan. Only the banknotes printed under Ungern on Urga presses were not accepted, even though he had ordered them to be printed with images of the animals most important for the nomadic economy. The note of highest value was decorated with a camel. Then, in order of descending value, came the horse, bull, and sheep. The Mongols were very proud of the first national currency in their history, but the feeling was platonic. As a means of payment, no one recognized them other than Ungern's own quartermasters, who attempted but failed to purchase provisions with them for the Asiatic division. On either side of the Botegegen stood retinue lamas in luxurious raiment, but the Hutakt himself was dressed in a simple monk's coat with a black border along the lower edge, a sign of his rank. Dark green spectacles concealed the blind man's eyes. Russian colonists who had lived in Urga said that the living Buddha, who in his early youth had suffered from a predilection for alcohol, had gone blind from methyl alcohol. Chinese traders had slipped him this poison on orders from Peking, which was displeased with the Hutakt's pro-Russian sentiments. Naidan Dorji prostrated himself before the Botegegen in an 8-point bow, falling on the rug with feet, knees, elbows, and hands. But Ungern himself limited himself to clicking his heels and bowing his head slightly. Here, in the East, the gesture weighed more than the word, and he had grounds for being dissatisfied. The finance and interior ministers were absent, and by that alone it was understood that the audience would be purely a matter of protocol, and serious decisions would not be made. Meanwhile, another audience in the near future was not envisioned. The troops were preparing for a campaign to the north and were stuffing their packs with dried meat. Opposite the Botegegen, lamas placed a bench with a stack of 5 flat pillows. Among those around the Hutakt were men prepared to humble the great Bator, the commander who revived the state. They are referring to Ungern. Therefore, before sitting, Ungern glanced inquiringly at his companion. Naidan Dorji nodded barely perceptibly as a sign that etiquette had not been violated and that the number of pillows were proper for a Khan or King Guang, the possessor of yellow reins and a 3-eyed peacock feather. Your High Holiness, Ungern began in Russian after sitting, I have come to pay a parting visit. The day after tomorrow we will begin our campaign to the Transbaikal region. I would have liked to see your ministers by your side, but unfortunately before the war begins. So I must inform you of the following. If military fortune betrays me, but I myself remain alive, I will lead my host to Tibet, to the Dalai Lama. We will assemble our forces and begin a new campaign. I will be so bold as to remind you that you were a captive of Chinese revolutionaries, and my men freed you, If the Red Russians enter Urga, your fate will be in their hands, but I will no longer be able to give you back your freedom and on the throne. Do not repeat past mistakes. Do not stay in Urga. Go to Ulyastai, where you will be in safety until my post's return. From there, we will continue on to Lhasa together. Naidan Dorji interpreted. Vogtgegen nodded with a polite smile, but did not utter a word in reply. Obeying an invisible sign, one Lama stepped away from the others. He was broad-chested and had a powerful neck like a wrestler's. In his outstretched hands, he held a square package of rough Halamba silk the size of half a packet of cigarettes. Forming a long loop, another silken cord was fastened to it, with a single red thread woven into the yellow. The drawing on the packet depicted a bald graybeard with a kindly face holding a crooked staff. Evidently, this was an amulet. Ungern respectfully accepted the gift and immediately hung it around his neck, pining it under his robe. The fat Lama said something, but taken together the familiar words made no sense and their meaning slipped away. Ungern turned toward Naidan Dorji, who whispered, "Clothed in yellow, your path guided by yellow, take as a gift the Gao of the great Sagan Ubugan, who guards the earth from his yellow holy grave. He will protect you in your affairs, and his spirit will fortify your body and mollify the stern ways of the inhabitants of the northern lands." Sandalwood powder smoldered in a bronze censer on two tall bird legs, emitting a fragrant, sweet, bodily scent, like the scent of an importunate lover's bed in the morning. He felt like getting out into the fresh air quickly. The Lama kept talking. Naidan Dorji kept interpreting, and Vogtgegen rhythmically nodded his shaved parchment head, showing that the words were coming from him, only their sound belonged to someone else. This old man with the face of a cardinal knew how to hear the gods whisper and was himself a god, but having returned from journeys through other worlds, he drank by the bottles of champagne proffered him by the Russian, Japanese, and American consuls, competing among themselves, enjoyed the gramophone's banal arias, and entertained himself by using his dynamo to run electric charges through his terrified servants. He was blind, but all his intimates wished to send the blind Buddha back to Nirvana themselves. All his intimates who wished to send the blind Buddha back to Nirvana themselves disappeared. Some died after drinking a bottle of low-state coke, others after riding on a horse with poisoned reins, or having put their foot into a boot with a poisoned thorn inside. Suddenly, Ungern felt a faint burning on his chest, right where the Gao with the bald gray beard touched the naked skin under his princely deal. The Lama, who looked like a wrestler, had finished his speech, and Naidan Dorji was hastily interpreting the last words. The rolling wheel of the teaching knows no obstacles. The mountains in its path become foam, water like stone. Ungern silenced him with one look. "Thank you for the gift," he said in Mongolian. "Is the Gao burning you?" Vogtgegen asked with a smile. "Yes." "Don't be afraid. It isn't poison. It is that Sagan Ubugun has touched your body."